In a world where spectacle and arrogance dominate, there was one fighter who stood out for his unbreakable discipline and relentless code of honor. Khabib Nurmagomedov didn't just defeat every opponent inside the octagon. He also challenged the rules of the game outside of it. But behind his image as a humble warrior lies a story of dangerous rivalries, bitter feuds, and a mindset so strict that some call it extreme. Raised in the wildlands of Dagestan, forged through brutal training since childhood, Khabib became an indestructible fighter. But his path was not without darkness. His explosive temper, his conflict with the UFC, and the controversies that marked his career reveal a side that few dare to see. Welcome to the price of success of Khabib Nurmagomedov. The origins that shaped him. To understand Khabib Nurmagomedov, one must first understand the place where he was born. Dagestan, a harsh land where violence and conflict have been a way of life. Surrounded by war, poverty, and an unbreakable code of honor, this corner of the world is not for the weak. Here, the law of the strongest is the only one that matters, and Khabib grew up knowing that weakness was not an option. From an early age, his father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, a legendary combat trainer, subjected him to a ruthless training regimen. He was not just a child learning to defend himself, he was a soldier in the making. While other kids played in the streets, Khabib fought against older youths, climbed mountains with weights strapped to his back, and faced challenges that would test even the strongest man. In one of the most brutal training sessions, he was forced to wrestle a bear, not as a spectacle, but as a message. In life, you either dominate the beast or the beast devours you. But it wasn't just about strength. From a young age, Khabib was raised under an unforgiving code of discipline. This mindset made him an indestructible warrior, a fighter with an iron will. But it also marked him with a dangerous obsession. Victory was not enough. His enemy had to be humiliated, defeated without mercy. Khabib didn't fight just for titles. He fought for a legacy, for a tradition that did not accept compromises. The boy who once trained in the rough gyms of Dagestan would become the most dominant fighter in UFC history. But in the process, he would also prove that his extreme mentality would lead him to face more than just opponents in the octagon. It would lead him to a war against the entire world. The most feared rival. From the moment Khabib Nurmagomedov stepped into the octagon, it was clear that he was not just another fighter. He didn't come to trade blows. He didn't seek entertainment. He came to destroy. His style wasn't explosive like a knockout artist, nor elegant like a strategist. It was suffocating, relentless. Once Khabib got his hands on his opponent, the fight was already decided. He dragged them to the ground, smothered them with his pressure, wore them down until fear took over their mind. He wasn't fighting men. He was hunting them. Throughout his career, he faced the best fighters in the world and made them look like amateurs. Edson Barboza, one of the most dangerous strikers in the UFC, ended the fight with a lost look, as if he had witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see. Dustin Poirier, a fighter with the heart of a warrior, broke into tears after being submitted, admitting that he simply couldn't do anything against the storm that is Khabib. Justin Gaethje, a man who always promised he would never surrender, ended up trapped in a deadly triangle choke with no choice but to fall unconscious. His fight against McGregor and the chaos in the ring. Not all his rivals were just fighters. Some, unknowingly, became personal enemies. And no one sparked Khabib's fury more than Conor McGregor. If you want to know how it all began, go watch the video titled, "Why Conor McGregor Should Be in Jail." What started as a simple rivalry turned into a war without limits. McGregor, the master of trash talk, tried to do what he always did: get inside his opponent's head, But Khabib wasn't like the others. He didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. He just stored rage. But what ignited the spark wasn't McGregor's words. It was his attack on Khabib's family. His insults to his religion and his country. "Talk now!" Khabib shouted at McGregor while dominating him on the ground, striking him without mercy. He humiliated him, reduced him to a helpless fighter. And when the final moment came, he showed no mercy. He applied a submission that didn't just take the fight, it took his soul. McGregor couldn't resist. He tapped out, but for Khabib, the fight wasn't over. The accumulated rage, the tarnished honor, the undeclared war, it all exploded in a single moment. In an act of uncontrolled fury, he leaped over the cage and attacked McGregor's team. The octagon became a battlefield, with fighters, coaches, and security brawling among themselves. The UFC had never seen anything like it. The Nevada Athletic Commission suspended both fighters and fined Khabib $500,000. But for him, the fight wasn't about money. It was personal. For Khabib, this wasn't just a fight. It was a matter of honor. And the question lingered. Did Khabib go too far in his revenge? After the fight, Khabib continued his career and defended his title twice more before retiring undefeated in 2020. Khabib retired as an undefeated champion, and McGregor remained trapped in the shadow of his most humiliating defeat. In UFC history, there has never been a rivalry as intense. There has never been a hatred so real, and there has never been a defeat as crushing as Conor McGregor's. Honor above all. Khabib didn't just fight in the cage. He also fought in the world of values and morals. Despite being one of the biggest stars in the UFC, Khabib had a tense relationship with the company. In the world of spectacle and money, Khabib Nurmagomedov was always a different man. While other fighters built their brands with excess, parties, and big endorsement deals, Khabib remained true to his beliefs. For him, discipline was everything. He rejected million-dollar deals with alcohol brands, openly criticized fighters who promoted a life of luxury and vice. And even at the peak of his career, when Dana White offered him a drink to celebrate his victory, he refused with a cold stare and a firm response. "I don't drink." His sense of honor didn't just clash with his rivals, it also clashed with the organization that made him a star. Khabib had a tense relationship with the UFC, especially with its president, Dana White. He wasn't the type of fighter who simply followed orders. He demanded respect, he demanded conditions, and when he didn't get them, he stood his ground. Throughout his career, he refused certain fights, rejected matchups he didn't consider worthy, and made it clear he wouldn't do anything that went against his values. The UFC, an organization built on entertainment and spectacle, didn't know how to handle a fighter who didn't want to play by their rules. Khabib wasn't just an athlete, he was a man with his own code, and the company began to see him as much of a problem as an asset. The breaking point came in 2020. The death of his father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, was the hardest blow of his life. Abdulmanap wasn't just his coach. He was his mentor, his guide, the reason he fought. Without him, Khabib felt the purpose of his career had faded. Despite Dana White's pleas and multi-million-dollar offers to keep fighting, Khabib made a decision few expected. He walked away. He retired undefeated at the top of the world, with a perfect record of 29 wins and 0 losses. Many applauded him. Others criticized him. Some said it was an act of greatness, of respect for his father's memory. But others wondered, did Khabib leave the cage because he knew he could never maintain his perfect legacy? Was it an act of principle or an act of fear? His life after the octagon. After his retirement in 2020, Khabib made it clear that his time in the cage was over, but his mission had just begun. The UFC had made him a warrior, but now he wanted to forge the next generation of champions. He founded his own MMA organization, Eagle Fighting Championship, with the vision of creating a space where fighters from Dagestan and other regions could shine in the world of mixed martial arts. But his influence didn't stop there. Khabib began training and guiding the fiercest fighters of the new generation. Among them, his most famous protege, Islam Makhachev, who would eventually take the UFC lightweight championship belt, following exactly in his mentor's footsteps. With every victory from his students, Khabib reaffirmed his legacy not just as a fighter, but as the architect of a dynasty. After his retirement, Khabib began building ties with political leaders and high-level businessmen. In his native Dagestan, his influence grew to the point where he was seen as an ambassador of his culture and a leader of the youth. He met with Russian President Vladimir Putin on multiple occasions, being welcomed as a national hero. Putin personally congratulated him after his victory over McGregor in 2018, and since then, their relationship has only strengthened. But Khabib didn't limit himself to politics. He expanded his financial empire. He invested in various businesses, from gyms and fight academies to sports franchises, and even an airline called Eagle Air. The goal? To create a network of power and influence that would allow him to control the future of sports and culture in his region. Today, Khabib is no longer just a retired fighter. He is a mentor, a businessman, and perhaps one of the most powerful figures in MMA history. Some see him as a symbol of discipline and success, someone who used his champion's mindset to build something greater. But others believe he is building an empire with a personal agenda, with ambitions that go beyond sports. The only certainty is that inside or outside the octagon, Khabib Nurmagomedov never stopped fighting, undefeated in the cage, but surrounded by controversy outside of it. Khabib Nurmagomedov isn't just a fighter. He is an unstoppable force. His story is that of a man who not only defeated all his opponents, but also imposed his vision of the world through honor, discipline, and absolute sacrifice. For many, he is a symbol of inspiration, a warrior who never sold out to money or excess, who retired at the top to honor his father, and now trains the next generation of fighters. But for others, he is a man trapped in his own extreme mindset, someone who despises those who don't follow his values, who scorns Western culture, and who isn't afraid to confront figures of power if he deems it necessary. His fight didn't end when he left the UFC. Now, he fights in a much larger arena, that of power, influence, and loyalty to his own philosophy. The question is Khabib a hero who defended his honor to the end, or is he a man too radical in his worldview? Let us know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the price of success.